leadership is not about who is the noisiest one, but who is sometimes the most humble one, but knows how to influence his colleagues, his fellow mates by leading by examples and by being there with them. And again, by having this humility and being approachable, but still being there, saying what needs to be said when the moment is here. When is the moment, he will be there to really lead the team and say what needs to be said in the halftime or whatever it is. And I really like this example because I think that's how sometimes leadership is not about authority or be the loudest one, but it's about humility.
How can a customer service mindset transform you into a better leader? Hello listeners, it's David Hatch here again with another episode of Leading with Integrity. Welcome to the first episode in our short series, The Heart of Leadership, a People-First Journey, during which we will be embarking on a month-long exploration of the essence and purpose that drives great leadership. In other words, people. Today's episode will hopefully be a bit like the heartwarming hug of excellent customer service. Familiar, comforting, and essential. Joining us for the kickoff of this month-long mini-series is Pierre Bauzée, a seasoned expert who has a true passion for both customer service and leadership. Pierre has dedicated his career to unraveling the secrets of great service, and he is here today to share his wisdom in the hugely important field of customer satisfaction on behalf of his company, Beyond Satisfaction. So we'll also be talking about how a customer service mindset can improve your leadership, to answer the question I had just now. And together we'll be diving deep into the world of customer service, uncovering those practices that really help ensure the best service to your people as well as by them. Because after all, your people and your team are the customers of your leadership. This is Leading with Integrity, Leadership Talk, the podcast for first-time managers who are working in tech-driven businesses and teams and who want to be more effective, people-first leaders. Each week, you will learn the crucial strategies, mindsets, and practical tips that successful modern leaders follow to be engaging, ethical, and authentic managers who get the best from their teams. And we'll achieve all of this via weekly conversations with leaders, with leadership experts, entrepreneurs, and business owners, people who have already walked this path and have some amazing insights to share, with an added sprinkling of occasional solo episodes and some group chats where we'll have multiple guests. My name is David Hatch and I will be your host. And leadership has always been a passion for me. After a career spent in a series of small businesses during 15 years in the aerospace industry, 5 or 6 of those at the end of that career were in a space startup in the UK. So trying to launch satellites into orbit, very cool stuff. And through all of that experience, I learned that the secret to successful management is in the ability to apply great leadership. And in turn, the secret to great leadership, it's all about your integrity, putting people before profits.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Joining me today is Pierre, who is an expert in all things customer service. So we're going to have a very interesting conversation, I've no doubt. Pierre, thank you for joining me today. And I must say, once again, second episode in a row, actually, which is quite unusual for me. I've actually got a guest who's in the same time zone as me. So that is nice.
Hi, David. Thank you very much for having me and really happy to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. And so we will start, as I always do, by giving you full control to tell the audience everything you want to tell them about yourself, your business, your background, why you do what you do.
Sounds very good. So I'm Pierre. I'm the founder of Beyond Satisfaction. I'm a customer service consultant and trainer. So let's start with my background, actually. So I've been working for more than 12 years in the hospitality industry, mostly in luxury and 5-star hotels. So I kind of grew up in what you should do best in terms of customer service, at least one aspect of it, which is the customer care and the customer relationship. And yeah, I decided when it was COVID, I had this kind of time where you can take a step back in your overall professional life, where I realized that it was the good time for me to start my own adventure. It was something I had in mind since a while. And I decided to start my consultancy and training business focusing on customer service. So obviously one of the main reasons why I wanted to start that is because customer service is something I've always been passionate about, but as well because I realized that it's much more than just customer care, customer relationship, or just applicable to a restaurant or hospitality, but it's really something that all businesses have and have in common, and that is crucial for all business success when you include not only the customer service methods, but as well the customer service strategies and what you can get out of it in terms of business growth, business performance, customer satisfaction experience, or just growth of revenue in the long term. So that's how I decided to start this adventure. So I mostly do two things: customer service training for guest facing employees. So I come in businesses who have employees dealing on a regular basis with customers, and I deliver specific courses or programs, or I provide business consulting on the customer service strategy and methods the business should have. It can be around customer journey mapping. It can be around improving the experience throughout the different touch points, and the opportunities of improvements that there is around those touch points. Or it can be in terms of the strategy they have around their customers to generate better business opportunities, more revenues in the long term, et cetera, et cetera. So this one really bespoke based on the business needs. And it's really something I enjoy doing. I mean, you'll notice, and I'm sure you know already, I could talk all day about customer service. I don't have problem with that.
But no, I'm just saying about leadership, as the listeners probably know by now. Yeah. So, I mean, it's an interesting field to be in. And I guess my first question is, what is it about customer service that has got you so passionate about it and about teaching it?
Well, I think it's two things. Is when it comes to the training, so really training guest facing employees, is I think some specific jobs that you may be doing where you have to be dealing constantly all day with customers. If you don't have the correct methods, the correct approach, and the correct skills when it comes to dealing with customers, not only it will impact the customers badly, but it will impact you as an employee personally. And it can be something very, very hard to deal with. And most part of the time when I train people, I realize that I talk a lot about the personal as well, how hard it is for them to deal with this situation. And actually customer service is a lot as well about, when it comes to this customer relationship, customer care, about how you deal with it personally, how you deal with those challenges, those difficult customers. So actually really take pleasures not only to get the clients to get a better experience, but get as well the employees to get a better experience. And I think that's where there's already a common ground between customer service and leadership. And obviously I just take pleasure as well to kind of educate certain businesses and business owners on how much they can get out of customer service, and just show all the different scopes of improvements that there is in customer service in general.
Yeah, I mean, I must say, from a customer perspective, the approach is like how good a company is at customer service is so wildly variable, isn't it? Not just between industries even, but within industries. I mean, you compare, say, I don't know, 2 or 3 of the high street supermarkets, and the customer service you'll get in each of those, even between locations, let alone within the same business, can be so variable. So what are some of the most common mistakes that you see companies making in the way that they deal with their clients, their customers?
Well, the first one will actually definitely be related to leadership. Actually, one of the first thing I've learned in the first hotel brand I worked for, which was Four Seasons, was that you definitely need to take care of your team, empower them and treat them the best way possible, support them, be there for them in order for them to do the same with your customers. It cannot work if you don't do that. So that is the first mistake that businesses will do, is sometimes they will be calling me out on training their team, where I realize that actually the problem is not, I just go in between two problems or between a conflict between the employees and the leader. And they want me to solve issues that they have themselves on training their team. And you can see the frustration from them. So it starts with great leadership. It starts with empowering the team and making sure your team deal well with your customers by you treating your team the best way possible. So that's, I'll say, definitely the first mistake. The second mistake that businesses make is definitely to not see enough the customer's perspective. Not only in the way they interact with the customers, but in the way they run the business, they make business decisions. Because at the end of the day, customer service is like an iceberg. The visible part is when the customer is in interaction with the business throughout the different touch points. But everything under the water is all the things you do where you're not facing the customers, the decision you make, the goals you set, etc., etc. But those things will keep the iceberg floating. So will have an impact on the customers. So if you don't include the customer journey in your terms and conditions, in the way you handle customers, in the way you deliver your offer, in the way you manage expectations, how do you want your customers to get the full benefits of what you're doing? Because you do not get their perspective. And how do you want them to get yours if you do not understand what should be a successful customer journey? So definitely understanding in all the different aspects of the customer journey, the customer perspective, so you can deliver the best experience. And I believe it's the same with leadership, right? When you lead a team, you need to make sure that you understand their perspective as well.
Obviously, I'm going to agree with your first point hugely, because in my head, everything comes down to leadership. I'm sure I'm biased because of what I do and what I love talking about, but I do think it's, when it comes to customer service, it's about the people, isn't it? And so it's the people within your business. And if you're not, as you say, if you're not leading them in the right way, if you're not understanding them, what their aspirations and goals are and all of those things, that absolutely filters through to the customer. And again, going back to the high street example, we've all had that experience, particularly in the UK. We have a certain thing around customer service in high street shops, I think. And you can tell the unengaged employee, the one who's only there for the paycheck, if that, the way they deal with the customer, they're short, they're sarcastic, they're not really interested in the customer needs or helping them out. We've all had that experience. But I think you're right. It comes down to leadership. What are they experiencing from their leaders, from their managers? Probably the same sort of behavior, and so it gets reflected onto the customer. And it's almost like a trickle down economics, isn't it? I know that's a buzzword in politics, but
that's very true. Like I always say, when I go into a cafe or any shops or just I'm interacting with a customer service representative and the person is rude or cold or unhappy, I always say, well, this person at some point must be not supported, frustrated by the management team, and not receiving good leadership or good support. I always say that as a first thing.
Yeah, and then you can see the opposite as well in other places and other shops. When you do have that positive experience with someone in a store, in my experience, it's usually because it's a smaller outfit and it's probably the owner of the business is on the premises and they're personally invested, not just financially, but emotionally and in terms of the values and caring about their customers. And you can see the difference.
Definitely. No, definitely. And I think if you want people to follow you along in your business journey, and if you want your team to follow you along in your business journey, you need at some point to inspire them and get them to go along with you and leading by example, rather being more working on the influence rather than on the authority are very important things. If training is very important when it comes to customer service, but you need to bring training because you're a great leader. If you bring training because you want the trainer to be the solutions of problems that you are creating yourself, then that's not the good approach at all.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, I love leading by example as well. And sometimes, that can just be as simple as actually being present. I think there's a lot of business owners, a lot of managers out there who would rather just kind of hand off the work and not be involved. And to an extent, okay, fair enough. But at the same time, you can't really expect stunning results if you're not showing that you care, that you're interested, that you're present.
Yeah, definitely. And it doesn't have to be something you have to, because obviously delegating is an important part of running a business. But I'll give you an example of before I started my business. When I was working in a 5-star hotel in London, I was head of events operations, and there were sometimes very massive turnarounds between a big lunch of 400 people and another big dinner. Very busy days, a lot of team members involved, and sometimes naturally, when it was the time of the turnaround, I'll remove the jacket, put it on the side, and be there with the team to get everything turned around with my teams of Maitre D that were there as well to support. Wheel table, set up everything, being there to coordinate. And once you do that, it was a natural thing. And I got so many positive feedback on that sometimes I was like, well, I'm sure you find me a strict manager. I'm sure you find me sometimes hard to work with. And many of them were saying, well, yes, but you're fair. And mostly you're there with us. And this, you're there with us, was like, wow. So it really has an impact on the team. Me, I did it because for me, it's normal that when, as a head, I need to be there on the worst and most difficult moment or more challenging situations. And actually putting the jacket on the side and be there with the team where there's no more leader, manager, there's just a team making it happen. And you are within this entity to make it happen. That's really strong and powerful. And of course, then you can ask much more from your team. And that was crucial at that time, because you ask a lot from your team in hospitality, in those environments, where your team can work more than 12 hours a day. And it doesn't matter, you work even more than them, because if you want them to go the extra mile for you, you need to go the extra mile for them, exactly the same than it is for clients.
Absolutely. Yeah. It goes back to what we were saying earlier, doesn't it? About understanding their needs, whether it's the client or the staff. I think for a lot of people, it's quite disheartening, quite demoralizing, isn't it? If they have the feeling that the boss isn't there, doesn't care, just wants them to do as they're told and isn't really going to support them. And that, the flip side of that, of course, is how powerful it is. And exactly as you've described in your example there, when the opposite happens and they are there, I don't like the cliche, but they're rolling up their sleeves. They're helping with the work. They're not just kind of dishing out the tasks and then disappearing till the end of the day. No, it's very important. Absolutely.
It's almost like if you take things for granted in life, generally, you're not going to get best results. And I think it works so well with both customer service and leadership. If you take things for granted, if you take customers for granted, if you take your team for granted, that can be the worst thing, the most hurtful thing for your business, for your clients, for yourself. That is really something to be careful about. So yeah, that's the rule I always try to apply to myself. I try to help my clients with, or try to, when I train audience, to say as well, is that, you shouldn't, in general in life, you shouldn't take things for granted.
What would you say are the biggest myths and misunderstandings maybe about customer service that you would like to challenge or set the record straight?
I really, really like this question. And actually, I kind of make the myth still be there by the examples I gave. I'll say that the myth that I will definitely, and I am actually challenging every day just by the name of my brand, the way I sell myself and everything I say, is that sometimes naturally, and I find that several times in one-to-ones, in meetings with people, when I just generally talk with people, is that naturally people will sometimes associate customer service to food and beverage, hospitality. Again, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, is that they will associate it to this, and they wouldn't see beyond that. or they would just associate it to customer, this image part of the iceberg, which is customer care and relationship. And they wouldn't see the bigger picture around customer service. For example, I'm actually currently writing an article about how customer experience is important for those digital businesses where everything is, all the interaction with the customers are done digitally. Especially because you don't have this human interaction, you need to make sure that the customer journey is spot on, that everything is covered. Otherwise, it can be terrible. And we've all been facing this, right? So yeah, I would say definitely the myth that, and as well the myth that customer service is something only delivered in luxury places. No, you can be a small sole trader, you can be a small shop, you can be a small business owner, or with very few resources and deliver outstanding customer service. It is not something that you necessarily need to invest a lot of money in to make it happen. You can just deliver great customer service with simple principles, simple basics, simple processes, and really, again, doing everything to see the client's perspective. So I'll say that's the two myths. You don't really need to have a lot of money to deliver great customer service, and it's definitely not something only applicable to the hospitality industry. In a way, I try to run away from this industry because, to give you a simple example, more than 80% of my clients are not hospitality clients. As simple as that. So yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So I'd always assumed that the name of your brand, Beyond Satisfaction, meant going further than just satisfying the customer. So you over deliver, which is a principle it's not always been easy. It's not always been practical. But I've always tried to do a little bit extra than what people are expecting.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to hear there's another dimension to that as well. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I think actually that's good. I think as well, Beyond Satisfaction has as well another meaning is definitely about how you go above and beyond, but as well that customer service is not only about the satisfaction, it's beyond that. There's other things. For instance, you cannot make all your customers happy. Sometimes it's not about making them happy because there's nothing you can do to make them happy. Sometimes it's about you knowing how to manage expectations successfully from the beginning, how to say no, how to have those courageous conversations when you have to, or sometimes just not onboarding a client, not taking the client on board, because that will only be a threat to you moving forward. So that's where, again, Beyond Satisfaction is, because you have to go above and beyond and do your best to really provide the best experience to your customers and go the extra mile for them, so they go the extra mile for you, and you get much more in terms of business opportunity, revenue, satisfaction, etc., etc. But as well, because customer service is not only about the satisfaction, it's beyond that.
I think, yeah, another nail you've hit on the head there is that third aspect of not onboarding a customer if you know they're not right for your business or what you're selling. I think particularly for small businesses, business owners, entrepreneurs, startups, I think that's quite often one of the biggest challenges we have, because the nature of that kind of company is that the bottom line is often the dictator, isn't it? Yeah. So you don't always feel able to turn away business, but actually it's super important that you do sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think it's, again, a very strong similarity between customer service and leadership is that I think that if you're recruiting a team, you need to recruit someone because someone left, and obviously you're short of staff for a certain period of time. The natural approach you may have will be to try to recruit someone quickly. But what if he's not the good profile? Sometimes you need time to find the right person by saying no to those that will not fit, because you wouldn't do a favor to them neither. And it's exactly the same with customers. If you see that's not the right customers because that will bring you complication and threat, you're not only not doing a favor to yourself and to your business, but you're not doing a favor to the customer, because you rather have said no because you know that this customer will not have the best experience because he or she is not expecting the right things. They will be challenging on things they shouldn't and therefore be unhappy. So again, that's very strong similarities about learning to say no. As simple as that.
Yeah, definitely. And there's that other aspect as well with the customer and in the leadership angle. If you're not able to say no, you do take on the wrong one, whether it's the wrong customer or the wrong member of the team, the impact that has more widely in the business. So in the customer case, it can damage your ability to service other customers, or it could damage your reputation in the market, or both. And then with the staff member, they may turn out to be a really high performer, but if they've got some toxic trait or their personality doesn't quite fit with the rest of the team, you're damaging your whole team's productivity by doing that. And I think that aspect is something as well that a lot of people don't consider. They just focus on the individual, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's very true. That's very true. And again, it's a little bit like, if you generally want your team to be more productive, but you only have expectations out of them rather than having as well a way to empower them and just give them the best working environment, how can you get them to be productive? Because again, I think that is another similarity between customer service and leadership, is that the emotional perception is very important in the customers and in your team. If you want your customers to get the best experience, you need to touch the emotional perception at some point. When you're happy with a service, it's because you remember this thing that they did, not the overall service. The overall quality of service, you're paying for it already. You have the set expectation. If you're getting what you're paying for, you're just going to be satisfied. If you really want to be wowed and really be remembered, take time to give a 5-star review. You need to have more than that, something that touches your emotional perception. It's the same with your team. At some point, if you just make them feel like a robot and you just show that you only care for them to do the job and you don't show that you care for them more than that, how can they go the extra mile for you and be more productive? If you want them to really step in and really make your business succeed, because it's definitely through the team, you need to make sure that you definitely go the extra mile for them in terms of the recognition you give, the approach you have with them, the support you give them, etc., etc. So again, I think that's a strong similarity between customer service and leadership.
I wonder if a good way to look at it is that your people are the customers of your leadership.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
Yeah.
I like it, actually.
Might have to be the title of this episode, actually.
That's a good one. That's a very good one.
Yeah. I'm writing it down just so I don't.
Please. You need to. No, but that's true. That's true. Your people are your team are the customers of your leadership.
Yeah. I think I like it because it speaks to a lot of the similarities, but also I think in a lot of ways, if you're the business owner and the leader, or you're the manager and the leader, you want to be treating or viewing customers and your people in the same way in a lot of respects. Granted, they will want different outcomes, but in terms of the way you interact with them and what you're trying to achieve for them, there's a lot of crossover, isn't there?
Yeah. And I think it's all about how you perceive your team or your clients. If you perceive your clients as walking wallets, that's how I like to call it, how can you provide good customer service and how can you give them respect, recognition, and provide them with an amazing experience? They're going to hate you if you see them this way. You're going to have the wrong sales approach. You're not going to be good. You're not going to manage expectations successfully, etc., etc. They're not going to be happy with the experience. But it's the same with your team. If you see them as inferior than you, or as people where you have authority upon them, how can you give them respect? How can you make them happy? So again, it's about, you need to perceive your team and your customers the good way. And funny enough, it seems to be very extreme case scenario I'm giving here, but there's a lot of bad leaders that see this way and think this way more than we think. And the same with business owners and professionals who see customers are just income. And that is really harmful to your business and to yourself as a leader or as a business owner or as a customer service provider.
Yeah. You mentioned respect there, and I think that's the center of it, isn't it? It's the respect and it's the trust, because I think in both cases you want that kind of two-way street with customers and with the people you're leading, that you trust and respect each other. It is an interesting one. And something else you mentioned earlier about the digital businesses, and I wonder if this problem of maybe bad leadership less so, but certainly poor customer service or viewing the customer as the wallet and nothing else, I wonder if the rise of the online business has made that more of a widespread problem, because it's a lot easier to view people that way when you never interact with them. And it's just a couple of clicks on your website and that's it. And there's not really any customer service unless something goes wrong.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is that if you don't build this successfully around the customer journey by understanding what are the different touch points that your business have digitally with your customers, but as well what to do in terms of customer issues and the most common customer issues that may occur throughout this digital journey, and how they should, are they aware of the processes to follow? Is it clear? Do they know who to contact in terms of issues? And then the minute you have a real human interaction, you better be spot on how you do it, because that's your time. The less human interactions you have with your customers, the more they're going to judge this specific human interaction that they are. So you better be spot on. For instance, if you are through an amazing e-commerce platform and everything's well built, you're really happy with the products, but the minute you have an issue and you get in contact with someone who is rude, unhelpful, and sarcastic, like you said, what are you going to remember throughout the whole experience? You're going to remember that specific one moment interaction. You're not going to remember the whole. Actually, I had a discussion with someone this week. I exactly mentioned that just this interaction that was terrible made all the rest that was good forgotten.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And again, it's another similarity to leadership, I think. So, I mean, we've both been in networking meetings where I've asked this question. And whenever I'm in front of a new group of people, I ask it as well. And I just say, hands up who's had an experience with a bad manager. And the number of people in any given room that put their hands up, it's usually 9 out of 10, a rough guess. But if you ask the other question, how many people have had a good experience with a good manager, it's usually a lot less. It's maybe half. And I think that maybe speaks to the same dynamic. I mean, it might be there's just way more bad managers, which may be true. But I think also the bad experiences tend to stick in our minds more and we remember them more, certainly for longer. It is an interesting dynamic of human behavior and memory, that, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think it's there's a lot of strong points and similarities between customer service and leadership. I knew there was, but I'm so happy to discover while we talk other ones. And like you said, you remember naturally human nature, you're going to remember more the negative than the positive. And the thing is, again, the people who will not raise their hand for the good managers that they had, therefore that they didn't have, they may not have only bad managers, but they may just have average managers sometimes. So they're not good enough to be included as good managers. And again, that's the same thing with customer service. You're not going to raise your hand as a very amazing experience if it was just okay, if it's just what you were expecting to receive. So that's where customer service step in and leadership step in as a way to generate more from your team and from your clients, is by providing more. Because again, your team will step in more for you, will give much more, will be much more productive, will be there for you on the difficult times as well. And that's a very important aspect, because every business has difficult time. When it comes to customers, that's how they're going to give you more recommendation, more feedback. They're going to take the time to give you this 5-star review, or they're just going to naturally spend more without feel they are being oversold or they are being upsell, if that makes sense. They're just going to naturally, once you're going to give them a suggestion of something you can help them with, they're not going to be like, oh, he or she's trying to upsell to me. They're just going to be like, this person's trying to help me more, and I trust this person, so I'm going to say yes to it. And that's a huge difference. Is sometimes when people have difficulty selling, when you make it about the customer's needs and about you wanting to help them, that's how you don't make it sound like you're selling. Sorry, I'm going into another aspect, but yeah.
No, it's a good point, and yeah, I mean, you're right, of course. It does. I mean, it kind of, not to be too reductive about it, but it does make me think of, from a systems point of view, it's like any real process or system. If you put rubbish in, you'll get rubbish out. But equally, if you put like really good quality inputs, really good quality data, or leadership behaviors, or customer service training, once it goes through the other end of the process, you're going to get much better outcomes.
Yeah. And I think it's about how you think short-term or long-term. If you only think short-term, what I'm going to get now, you're not going to be a good leader or a good customer service provider. But if you think long-term, how you want to make your business sustainable with a great team with low staff turnover and a happy team and great and loyal customers that brings you much more than just those monthly income, because in the long term, they bring you more business. They bring you better retention. They bring you better average spend. Once you understand, again, is about the business vision that you have. And I think people who are bad in leadership or bad in customer service, or businesses generally who are like that, I think they do not see the bigger picture, and they do not really think long-term sustainable business, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, again, same with leadership. We're kind of going into a broken record now, aren't we?
That's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing to talk about this line of similarities between both very interesting topics.
Yeah. Well, I guess the common factor is that it's about interacting with people, isn't it? That's the key aspect, yeah. And so it makes sense that there's a lot of similarities. Okay, so I'm going to skip a question, just conscious of time, but I think we've covered it anyway, and move on to the next kind of segment of the episode, which is where we talk a bit more specifically about leadership and some of the experiences you've had with it.
Yeah.
So the first question I have for you on that one is, what is the biggest leadership lesson that you've learned in your career so far?
The biggest leadership, well, definitely that leadership is not about authority. Is about influence. That would be the first thing. But the second thing I would definitely say is that it's really about balanced leadership, because you cannot be too nice neither. You simply cannot be too nice neither. You need to be respected as well. I mean, you need to be appreciated and respected, and that again is a fine balance between both. And I know that, for instance, on many occasions when I, in my career in hospitality, when I've been mentioned as a great leader, or I heard mostly other people mentioning another manager as a great leader, it was those leaders that sometimes really push them to their limits in terms of overcoming their fears, about improving on things that were challenging, that at some specific time they will hate. They will really hate. And that is, again, an interesting lesson about leadership, is that you're not always there to, as a leader, though you need to inspire your team and make them go above and beyond their own limits. You really need to make sure that you're actually pushing them out of their comfort zone if you want to do that. And by doing so, sometimes they're not going to like certain things. They're not going to like certain feedbacks. They're not going to like certain challenges that you bring them. They're not going to like the fact that you let them deal with the issues by themselves, etc., etc. But it's not because they don't like it now. They may actually really, unconsciously, internally hate you at that specific moment. Actually, that's how you're going to make them grow. That's how you're going to empower them. That's how you're going to make them go above and beyond their skills and their ability to do their job. And I think that's a very important aspect of leadership, is that, yes, it's about being there for your team, supporting them, but it's as well about sometimes getting them out of their comfort zone, if that makes sense.
It does. I think it's about, it's a different way of supporting, isn't it? So you're supporting their personal development.
Yep.
I think the real challenge for leadership in this aspect, and this is interesting because it's not something we talk about that much. I think the real challenge is how do you balance, as the leader, knowing that the kind of the pushing them out of the comfort zone or pushing them towards a growth opportunity, how you're aligning that with what their actual needs and wants are. Because I think we've probably all worked for leaders who have been really, really good at this, and maybe, yeah, you're right, at the time and maybe you weren't that happy about it, but looking back, you think, actually, I'm really glad that Steve or Bob or Jim or whoever they are pushed me into that training course, or pushed me to that meeting that I didn't want to go to, or took me on that customer meeting. Because if I hadn't been through that experience, yes, it was difficult, but I learned so much from it, and I would be in a different place today. But then also, we've also all worked for that difficult manager, the bad boss, who's made you do something that you've no interest in, you're not going to get any benefit from, but they've said they're doing it to push you out of your comfort zone just for its own sake, even though there's not really any benefit to you. And ultimately it's just because they want you to do something.
Yeah, that's very true. But
Yeah.
it's going to be very quickly noticed by the team because it's very clear as a team member to see this difference. And unfortunately, again, the only reason why people will mention those leaders that sometimes push them out of their comfort zone as great leaders is because they saw the result. If you're just doing it for your own benefits, it's quite a bad thing. And actually to kind of like follow up with something you said, it seems to be again a similarity between customer service and leadership is sometimes as the leader or as the expert, you know better than your team what is good for them in order to progress and improve and move forward based on their own needs. And it's the same with your customers. Sometimes you are the expert. You know what your what your customers needs in order to achieve what they want to achieve. So sometimes again, it's placing yourself as the expert, and sometimes having those courageous conversations either with your team member or either with your employees. If, for example, you know that you have one of your team member that wants to progress in a specific field and you know they need to improve on something they don't like, you may have to be the person to be having those courageous conversations with them to make them realize that. And it's the same with your customers. If they won't go for a specific offer and they have unrealistic expectations or deadlines, or they don't want to pay a certain price, and you know that they need to go for that if they want to have the full values, you again need to position yourself as the expert and have as well these courageous conversations. So courageous conversation is again something very powerful that you definitely need to have both with your team and your clients, so you kind of guide them towards the good direction when you know which direction to take, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, I guess the important caveat I would add to that is if we call it courageous conversations or the difficult ones or the potentially confrontational ones, is particularly from a leader's perspective or the leadership role, make sure that you're doing that with kindness and it's not being kind of confrontational for its own sake, if that makes sense. Because I think, yes, you're right. I think sometimes the leader, it's way more true, I think, in customer service than it is in leadership. But yes, sometimes you will be the expert in the situation. You'll know what is the right opportunity for growth for your people. Other times, maybe not so. And I think that the difficulty that I was alluding to earlier is how leaders can know the difference between the two situations. And I think a lot of managers, through no fault of their own, usually just from lack of training, get that wrong, or they default to the assumption that because they are the manager, they do know better. And then that leads you into all kinds of unpleasant results, staff retention problems, unhappy people, all those other kind of issues that really good leadership is all about avoiding.
I mean, to be honest, the approach is the number one thing. If you don't have I mean, that's why I call it courageous conversation with customers, is because the last thing you want to do when managing expectations and having those courageous conversations on sometimes sensitive topics with customers is to have the correct approach. If you are making it confrontational, you've lost. And I think, again, it's the same with your team. If you have to give a constructive feedback on a mistake that a team member made or on something that they didn't do properly, if you make it as you did something wrong, that's not good, etc., how do you want to empower the person? But if you make it as an objective feedback where you don't make anything personal and you say it in a constructive way, you can say sometimes the most difficult thing to hear, but it's going to be perceived as positive. And sometimes you can say something positive in a negative way, and it can be perceived as negative. So again, the approach, and again, another similarity, I think, between leadership and customers, the non-verbal communication and even the verbal communication that you give to the message you're sending is key, is totally key. And I think that's how sometimes, for instance, when you make it about, I want to help you, that is very, very powerful. Because when you make it with your customers about, the only reason why I bring this on the table is because I want to help you and provide you with the best service, you can say very challenging things or things they do not like to hear. You'll get the best outcome out of it. And I've seen it and done it hundreds of times, because then they are like, well, actually he or she is the expert and They only want to help me and guide me through towards a good direction. And I think it's the same when you lead a team. Even if you say a negative feedback or something you have to discuss about in an appraisal that it may be difficult to talk about or to hear for the team member. If you bring it, like you said, with this approach, that can be very powerful and you can really get good results out of it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Right, next question for you then, just to keep you on your toes.
Too much.
No, there's no such thing. It's all good. What's been your best experience of being led?
Back in France, in a 5-star hotel, I was working, and I think I've learned a lot from this person, and I try to apply it as well moving forward. Again, hospitality can be sometimes, many in 5-star and in operations can be sometimes where you really have to commit a lot, sacrifice a lot of your personal life, a lot of your working hours, health, sometimes mental and physical health. And when you have a manager who is there with you, and really is, sorry if that sounds very cliche or simple, but is in the same boat than you, and really driving it towards the good direction and being there through any storms, that is very inspiring. And again, once the person gives you the opportunities of improvement, you just take them the positive way. And when I saw that, I was like, that's how I want to be as a leader, when I was then a leader. And yeah, I think that a lot of things that it teach me either in customer service and leadership is things that I will today share and would love to talk about.
It's a good example, definitely. I think it reminds me of just the key differences really between a good and a bad manager, isn't it? So, I mean, the best manager I ever worked for was the one who would start conversations with the question, how can I help? Whereas the worst one I ever worked for started conversations with, is it ready yet? Why not? And it's exactly that, isn't it? The difference that you're talking about there.
And that's true. I think this sentence, how can I help, is very powerful because again, it's about, I'm there to help you doing your job better. So, actually, once, it was a very long time ago, I attended a leadership training back in France 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And she said something very true. She said, sometimes we think that because hierarchically you're above, you're more important, but that's not true because most part of the time, if you will have to do their job, you will not do it as good as they do it. So it's just that you're given other responsibilities. But again, could you make it happen without them? Could you do what they do as good as they do it? Once you ask yourself these questions, is again putting yourself in perspective that as well, one of your role is to help your team perform well on something that are actually probably better in doing that if you will be doing it. So that's bring you another perspective, right?
Oh, 100%. I think that's especially true in the kind of industries and companies where it's technology driven. I mean, we talked about online businesses earlier. I think anything where there's a software aspect or computing is involved, like by the time you've kind of got your feet under the desk as a new manager, the technology you knew about in your last job has changed probably 4 times.
Yep.
And so you can't rely anymore in certainly those industries. I guess it's true globally, really, with just the general pace of change these days as well, but maybe less so. You certainly can't rely on knowing more than the people you're leading anymore.
That's very true.
Yeah, indeed. So what advice then, what would be your best advice that you could offer to, say, a first-time customer service manager who is really struggling to make a success of their new job?
Well, the first advice I will give this person is to, if you want, and that's the first thing I do when I start my training, if you want your team to provide the best experience to your customers, you need to make them realize how important they are in this role. That is key. Because most part of the time, the reason why they don't provide good customer service is they don't feel important. And already some customers will not have good intention, will be very disrespectful. You just have to stay more than 20 minutes in a cafe to see how human nature is sometimes, where people, the minute they have this level of importance because they are being served. They will use it to humiliate or put down people. That's human nature, unfortunately. And customer service providers that are dealing with customers on a regular basis, they have to face those things already. It's already something that can put them down. And again, that's why earlier I said how important it is to manage this emotional, this personal aspect of customer service, because it's key. If you cannot manage yourself personally and emotionally when dealing with difficult customer related situations, how can you deal with them successfully and have the best impact on clients? So if you don't, as a leader, make them feel important in the way they deliver customer service, how can they deliver customer service? You need to highlight the fact that in the eyes of the customer, whatever position they are having, whatever level they are hierarchically, when they deal with customers, they represent the business. They may actually be the main point of interaction of the customers. They may fully represent the business. Again, if you go to a cafe, if you go to a restaurant, if you have this just one call in a digital, with a digital business, this person you'll be talking to represent the business. And once you make them realize this importance, they will first of all understand the outcome of what they provide and how important it is, but they will feel more important, which is key.
No, it makes perfect sense to me. And again, it's very leadership oriented, isn't it? Yeah, we're probably, what's the phrase? Flogging the dead horse on that one at this point. Certainly the broken record, isn't it? So there's a definite conclusion from this episode, which is there are huge similarities between customer service and leadership. So this question I'm going to ask you now is potentially quite difficult, but I do love asking it because I would get some really interesting answers. So the question is, if you could go back in time to the start of your career, would you do anything differently?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think there's a lot of things I would do differently. But if I have to pick up one, well, I'll make it both customer service and leadership related. Yeah, we'll say sometimes manage my emotions better when it comes to, because I think a lot of bad leaders at times, because I don't think you're always a bad leader. I mean, sometimes even good leader can be bad leaders, as sometimes it's like in customer service, you cannot always be perfect, right? And I think sometimes when my emotions overtook my objective judgment, mainly in an environment where there's a lot of pressure, etc., I may not have been having the best approach with my team, and therefore not having the best way of getting them to deliver good customer service moving forward. So I think, yeah, definitely managing emotions, which again, I think is such a good conclusion to our talk, because again, the way you manage your emotions is so important on the way you lead your team, but as well on the way you deal with customers. So I'll say definitely if I will change one thing will be to be better at that, mainly at the beginning of my career, like 8 to 10 years ago.
That's a very honest answer. I like it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I mean, reflecting on it, I think most people would probably say the same. I know I would. I mean, there's times, and you're right. I mean, everyone has bad days, but there's times where you just let the situation get the best of you, aren't there? And you do regret it probably quite quickly.
The problem, I think, is if you don't apologize after, for instance, either to your customers or to your team, because you may be afraid that it is seen as weakness, and actually is a weakness to see it as a weakness and to not apologize, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point.
Leadership heroes.
Last question. It's called Leadership Heroes.
Yep.
Probably know this one is coming. If you had to pick one person, alive or dead, past, present, real or fictional, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership, who would that person be and why?
All right. I thought about it already, and I have to say that I have more than one. I have more than one, and they're all on an equal for different reasons. But because we're in the middle of the Rugby World Cup, I'll have to pick up one. Actually, I could give some very good rugby coaches, but I'll give an example of someone who is a fairly new leader, and I think that's quite a good way of finishing this conversation. I would definitely say actually Antoine Dupont, who is the captain of the French team, and the reason why is actually he may be 10 years younger than me. And he's a fairly new leader because he's only been the captain of the French team since maybe 3 years. And before that, he wasn't captain. He was quite fairly young. And he is both the captain, but as well the scrum half. I will not detail anything about rugby now, but let's say that his position in the team require a lot of leadership, and seeing a lot of interviews, he wasn't at all a natural leader. He's actually a very introverted person, and very discreet person. And again, it shows that leadership is not about, what I really like about this example, it shows that leadership is not about who is the noisiest one, but who is sometimes the most humble one, but knows how to influence his colleagues, his fellow mates by leading by examples and by being there with them. And again, by having this humility and being approachable, but still being there, saying what needs to be said when the moment is here. What we say in French, I don't know if you have an English for that, un faux calme, a false calm, because actually when is the moment, he will be there to really lead the team and say what needs to be said in the halftime or whatever it is. And I really like this example because I think that's how sometimes leadership is not about authority or be the loudest one, but it's about humility, and being an approachable person. And by naturally developing a leadership out of this, even if you don't have much experience. And I think for a young person as he is to already show that much leadership, I have to say hat down. So yeah. And I don't say that because I'm French and I'm supporting the French team in rugby, by the way.
No, of course not. No. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah. I like your choice there. I don't follow rugby. I've never heard of it, I'm afraid, but I like your explanation. I think particularly because you've chosen a new leader, which after all is what leading with integrity is all aimed at. So that's a great idea. Love that. Couple of points I would pick up on that you said about introversion there, and I think that's an interesting point of view. I think one of my previous guests might take issue with what you've said there, but I see where you're coming from, because I think the traditional perception or expectation of what a leader looks like in terms of their personality and the way they behave and that kind of thing, it's very much not an introvert. And I think that's probably the point you're trying to make. But it is an interesting one because I actually think introverts usually make the best leaders, for a whole range of reasons. Partly because they listen more than they speak, which I think is one of the key aspects of good leadership. And yeah, so very, very interesting choice. Thank you for that one. And we've obviously not had that chosen before because I haven't had any French rugby fans on the show before. So there we go.
Well, I mean, I think like you said, I agree with that. I think introverts can be the best leaders, and as well, I think is because you're not, like you said, first of all, you're listening, you're more listening than talking sometimes, which is very powerful, both in leadership and customer service again, because listening is key for customer service as well, but as well because it is, if you have a wrong idea of introversions and you think it's just you being silent and not talking in a corner of a room all the time, then yeah, that is the wrong vision of it. So naturally, people will have a fake idea of what leadership and introversion is. So that is a very interesting point. And again, introverted doesn't mean my best friend. He's actually, you would call him an introverted. But again, he's an amazing leader. And he just worked in a boulangerie bread making shop and pastry shop in Paris. And again, when the time comes, it's like a little bit like you talk less, but when you talk, it has almost more weight, more value. And I think that's very powerful in leadership.
Oh yeah, 100% agree. I think there's a lot of what's the word? Best word for it is probably noise, isn't it? I think there's those leaders, and again, it's not necessarily their fault. I think it's part of this whole misunderstanding. It's a myth of leadership, isn't it? It's that accepted norm, the perception that a leader is outspoken, is vocal, is always, telling people what to do and where to do it and how to do it and all that kind of stuff. And really what that is noise. Yeah. Because if you're trying to lead a group of people without listening to what they're telling you, you might as well just do the work yourself. But of course, the catch is you can't. So, and
I've realized, actually, I'll finish on one last point, actually. I've realized sometimes and I mean, I'm a person who talk a lot as well, by the way, if you haven't noticed by then. But sometimes this leader, who's going to be like noisy and keep giving instructions, actually may be the most underconfident leader. And he or she may do that, especially because he or she is not confident, right? To kind of fill the gap. But actually a leader who is in control and knows when to speak, when not to speak, when to listen, when not to listen, etc., that shows much more confidence, actually.
Yeah, good point. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a whole thing around whether introvert, extrovert, and confidence, and how much those two things cross over. And I mean, hopefully the listeners have heard the previous episode I did with Tom Cleary about this. But I do think it does take an awful lot more confidence to be comfortable with silence and to not feel like you have to fill that awkward silence. And how well that lines up with extrovert versus introvert, I don't know. But
actually, I had a very good conversation with Tom about that.
Where we talked
exactly about this, that sometimes this person going in a networking event talking so much, maybe because he or she is actually underconfident and is not comfortable with those silence. So that's very true.
It's funny, isn't it, how even things like confidence can be perceived in different ways. Because I mean, a lot of people would look at someone who talks a lot and is happy to talk in a room full of people as being really confident, when actually the opposite might very well be true. Mm-hmm. And same with silence, again, it's the other way around. Or it can be. Anyway, I think everyone's different, aren't they? But
definitely. And sometimes I think that people overconfident are actually doing that because they are not confident and they need to do it this way in order to feel good with themselves. So that is again bringing so many interesting perspectives. And I'm sure we could do another 1 hour talk on this, but I'm going to stop talking now.
Pierre, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of the things you've shared with us today. I've no doubt that there will be many listeners who've heard this and are interested in learning more about you and what you do. So if you'd like to point them towards your website or LinkedIn profile or anything like that where they can find out more about you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you again, David. It's been an amazing opportunity and a really, really good discussion. And thank you as well for bringing so many great insights from your end. And yes, LinkedIn, website, wherever you want to reach me out, I will be there answering and showing good customer service. Lead by example, right?
100%. Yeah. And I'll put the links and everything in the episode description so everyone can find it easily. And yeah, time's up. Thank you again so much.
Thanks to you.
And as we reach the end of this episode, remember that the heart of leadership beats in service to others, which seems quite on trend for the topic today. If Pierre's insights have resonated with you as they did with me, be sure to check out more of his expertise. You'll find the website address to do that in the episode description. Massive thank you to Pierre today for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us. Listeners, thank you for joining us again. Your support is truly what makes this podcast happen. We couldn't do it without you, so thank you. And don't forget to check back again next week and indeed every week for the rest of this month, as we'll be staying on our topic of people first and what is the heart of leadership. Our next guest next week on this theme will be Natalie Oldfield, with whom I'll be chatting about trust and building those crucial human connections that make your leadership succeed or fail. Until then, keep an open mind to the power of service, customer or otherwise. Continue to put your people first and be a leader, not a boss.